Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now.
Travis, so let's talk about sports and advertising here for a minute. We've seen the landscape is changing, right? As investors, a lot of times we talk about this through like the lens of the opportunity for streaming or the weakness for the change in linear TV. So thinking about Disney, ESPN's been a big cash cow. It's really struggling. We know a lot of those sports contracts that ESPN has signed have basically been subsidized by that big fee that ESPN's be able to charge the cable companies, right? That money's starting to dry up. Everything that's happened with the beginning of the Major League Baseball season has started with the collapse of the regional sports networks, right? Which have been a big beneficiary signing the local sports deals that have benefited a lot of local sports, NBA and Major League Baseball both. We haven't seen streaming really kind of pick up all of the slack. We've seen some deals, but we haven't seen,
And they're
they
kind of
haven't
like hit or
certainly haven't
miss,
bridged the
right?
gap.
Just like somebody writing a big check for football
Yeah.
or something, right?
So the question is, if you're a sports league and you're looking out in the future, you've got to be thinking about advertising as something that's going to generate revenue over the long term. If those big contracts, those no longer become the cash cow. Here's the thing. Do the numbers work? Can sports teams, can sports leagues, can they pay the bills just on advertising?
So this is what I have been kind of trying to think through lately, because I think it's really easy to just say, okay, cable's declining, ESPN's revenue is going down. They're going to be in a really tough position paying the $2.7 billion check that they need to pay to the NBA every year. I think that's the canary in the coal mine will be the NBA. But one thing that I keep going back to is in the last just 3 or 4 months, we have seen significant traction from Netflix, specifically in advertising, and the continuation of Disney pushing advertising into its services. So remember, Disney Plus launched in 2019, no advertising, $5 a month, super cheap. Guess what? That didn't last. Not only is the price going up, but advertising is coming to Disney Plus. So that gives these streaming companies a lot more revenue opportunity. And as
Netflix has told us, Travis, that their ad model, which is you pay a flat rate plus you get some ads on a per user basis, generates more revenue than their pure premium subscription model.
Exactly. So ads are extremely lucrative. And the question to me with the sports leagues is right now you're walling people off. I'm somebody who's been using YouTube TV for a really long time. I have not had access to our local sports teams, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Twins, for years now. As a result, my son, who's 6, has basically never watched a game live. That's not the case with the NFL because the NFL has done a really good job keeping its stuff on channels that's accessible to everybody. So how do you expand the pie? Instead of trying to squeeze more out of a shrinking pie, can you expand the pie? So I wanted to run through just a couple of numbers. And this is kind of back of the napkin math, but does it work for a streaming company to make some sort of deal with, let's say Disney goes to the NBA and says, hey, you know what? We will have a NBA tier that's not going to cost $200 a year the way that it does with like the league pass kind of a thing. Maybe it's $20 a year, but we're going to include a ton of advertising and we're going to just take a 30% revenue share. But there's the only people in this deal are us and you because you're taking the cable company out of it. So there's like less middlemen. So let's just go through a few of these numbers. So $2.7 billion, that's what you got to make up. Cable households is about 72 million. That means that each year, each household is paying about $37.50 per year for the NBA, just based on that simple math. Streaming, let's say that you could get to 20 million households watching games on a semi-regular basis or paying something. That means you need to make about 100
people that are willing to pay something to have access,
whether that's financially or via your time to watching advertising.
right?
Yes. So your pie is smaller, but probably more invested in your product because you don't have a bunch of these people who don't care about the NBA paying for the NBA because they actually just want to watch HGTV. So that means you need to make $135 per year from those 20 million people since your pie's gotten a little bit smaller. Netflix said that they generated $65 per ad in the per thousand impressions
Or CPI per thousand ads.
CPM, per thousand ads in their advertising model, which is a really high number. That's significantly more than something like YouTube. Maybe the NBA, which is going to have a more targeted audience, you could even maybe push that a little bit higher. So what does the math look like? Okay, so to get to that number of impressions, I have to watch 148 hours of basketball. I need to watch 74 games. That's maybe not reasonable, but we're not out of the realm of possibility. If I'm wrong on one of these numbers by double, and let's say you could get twice as many ads per hour. I think I put 10 in here. Maybe you do twice as many ads per hour. Maybe you charge a small amount to get access. Maybe your addressable audience is not 20 million because maybe you get a worldwide deal. So maybe your addressable audience is 100 million and they're watching fewer hours. I just think the fact that there's so much advertising money going into streaming potentially changes the game for the sports leagues, because maybe they can get to a point where they have a very low cost or no cost option. You have more content available. So maybe now I can live anywhere in the world. Instead of dealing with a regional sports network, you have just a global deal for all of these sports leagues, and they make their pie much, much bigger. And they say, we don't need to monetize each person at $37.50. We need to monetize each person at $5 because we've made our pie that much bigger. That's what's potentially really compelling to me about streaming. And now we're talking about real numbers with Disney and Netflix. You're talking about hundreds of millions of subscribers. I think there's something there. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think there's something there. Do you have thoughts? No?
Nice.
Am I crazy?
I think there's something there, right? Then it pencils out pretty close where you can talk about something like that. Again, $5 a month, $10 a month. Those are like at the level that it's disposable enough that it's a small enough number. If somebody's remotely interested in it, they're going to pay it, right? And when you make that transition to an over-the-top streaming product versus a cable box and you have to find the channel, the reality is that when you're on the channel, you're just on the channel, it comes up. But now the way that we consume, you have to actively make that choice to consume that specific product, right? So I think that immediately lowers the bar for people that are going to be willing to pay that additional money. But I think the key is, what is the CPI, right? What does that value really pencil out? How targeted? Because sports fans can be very diverse, right? So their ability to target the ads, maybe it's not as good as a Netflix because they have tons of data about their viewers, right? And that might be one of the reasons that Netflix is able to get that 65 cents per thousand, that 65 per thousand they're getting. We'll see. I think it's interesting though, and it's going to definitely be compelling to watch because the reality is that those contracts are going to come to an end. The leagues have to be ready. They have to do something to be prepared, and they need to be ahead of it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely.